Creating conversations with other storytellers. That's arrow.net, ARROE.net. We are unplugged and totally uncut with Brian McDonald. His new book, 5 Floors Up.
I'm doing real good, Arrow. How are you?
Absolutely fantastic. I love stories like this because I believe that history is how we get to the present place of now. And we need books like this to be in the hands of people that are going, I don't know why I'm here, but I'm here. Well, let's go find out. Let's go look at the building blocks.
I agree wholeheartedly. Thank God for that.
So when you put a story like this together, 5 Floors Up, I mean, this is a heroic story of 4 generations of the fire department of New York City. This required some homework. You didn't sit around expecting this thing just to land on your plate.
Yeah, well, there was a lot. You know, I did a lot of research, and the New York City Fire Department was very gracious, opening up their doors to their logs and material and books and what have you. So that was good, and that's the fun part. I like that. But most of the meat of the book comes from interviews, and I interviewed 100 firefighters more. I interviewed the families of firefighters more, and then I interviewed the specific family, the Feehan family, of whom I wrote, and tried to bring their story to the page, because I think although the book is 100 years of New York City Fire Department history, and it has all the big dramatic moments, including the most dramatic moment, 9/11. It's also a family story underneath, and what the family goes through during those moments, or in between the moments, just as importantly. It's they're ordinary heroes. They're out there running up buildings and running into burning houses and going home and cooking dinner and going, coaching soccer. So they're amazing people.
Brian, I'm a daily writer. I wrote through 9/11 as a broadcaster, and every year I go back to those pages to kind of just get myself back into that moment of this is why you do what you do. So when you were going through that historic moment, what did you go through emotionally? Because when I go back to those words, oh my God, it gets inside my soul.
Yeah, it was a very emotional time. It was a time in my career when I wasn't, I had written a couple of books, but I had to supplement the income. I went behind a bar. I was working as a bartender on the west side of Manhattan, and we had a clientele of firefighters that used to come in, and also brokers from Cantor Fitzgerald, which was one of the top floors of the tower, most of whom were killed in the attack, hundreds of them killed in the attack. So it was an incredibly sad time, and it was. And yet there was a time, and this is not just New Yorkers. This is every place that goes through something, an emotional upheaval like that. You just band together. It becomes a big brotherhood, a sisterhood, and it's us again. And they're not going to do it to us. We're not going to let them see us scared. We're not going to let them see us defeated. We're going to stick our chins out, and we're going to walk right up to them. So that's how I remember feeling at that time.
And what's really interesting, Brian, is that in my eyes, they are like Marvel characters. They are superheroes of our day. But when I sit down and have a conversation with a firefighter and I thank them, they go, I'm just doing my job. And I look at them and I go, oh my God, most people complain about their job. You have this strength to turn your job into something that affects our community.
Yeah, and most of them shun the spotlight. And this family that I wrote about is specifically the Feehans. They reluctantly they went along with this project because they didn't want, not that they had anything to hide. It's that they weren't public people. They wanted to live their lives in private, and the acts of heroism are done in private. They don't want to be on the front page of the newspaper. But I also found out that firefighters, almost to a man or woman, love their job, love doing what they're doing, love going to work. And there's not a lot of professions where that's the case. And there was one retired firefighter I interviewed for the book, and I said, what was it like? And he said, it was more fun than grammar school. Yeah. And I didn't pay attention in grammar school, he said. So Yeah, it was a lot of fun doing the book.
All of those interviews, and you build this story, the 5 floors up. What's really interesting is that you've got the sound, and so will you grow that sound into podcasts or into documentaries? What will you do with all of those interviews? Because you're preserving history like an archaeologist.
You know, it's funny you say that, because part of the way I came to this project, a woman named Beth Feehan, who was the sister-in-law. The daughter-in-law of Chief William Feehan, the main character of the book, was putting together a documentary of her father-in-law, and she wanted representation. I mean, it's a long story, but the agent that talked to her said, "You really should have a book." And when I was introduced to her, I said, "This isn't. I mean, your father-in-law is an amazing story, but this is a family." I saw it, with a much broader arc. And but we were so lucky, because even though Chief Feehan died in 9/11, he was the oldest and the highest ranking member of the fire department killed that day. And I write in the book, his face felt the heat of 1,000 fires. It did, or close to it. He was in a lot of very busy firehouses. And at 71, he was directing a rescue operation on site at the World Trade Center attack, and died when the North Tower came down. But when she was doing the documentary, her family, for whatever reason, they had hours and hours of interview. I guess they were keeping for posterity or whatever of their father and father-in-law. So it was just amazing. It was like he was still alive. I was watching him on film, on videotape. Hours of it, and hearing the way he talked, his sense of humor, his interaction. It was just so much of a tool in putting his life together for the page. Something I'm really grateful for. Very, very. And then, the first generation, of course, he's been dead a long time, but I supplemented that part of the book with a lot of history of the fire department. Very colorful time in the New York City Fire Department.
Did you notice any true connection? Because I've talked with different spiritualists and stuff like that. They say that we really never die. We just pass the energy forward. Did you feel that as you were talking to the 4 generations, that it was like, oh my God, this actually could be the same person that from the first generation?
I don't dismiss that. I think you might be onto something. I have, I called it a hero gene, mm-hmm. that they pass along this whatever component that a lot of us don't understand, to run into burning buildings to save people they don't know. But maybe it's more than that. Maybe it's a hero soul that gets passed along. I know that Connor Davin, the youngest generation, the 4th generation, who's a firefighter in Brooklyn now, in his firehouse, a picture of his grandfather, who died in 9/11, is on the stairs going up to quarters. And every time he goes up those stairs, he passes his grandfather's picture. And it just blows my mind. It's almost like his grandfather is there as part of his life, or looking over his life, or whatever it is. It's really something. And like I said, I don't dismiss your belief there at all.
Well, the book is coming out at a great time, because we're at that point in history 21 years later where people, they're starting to forget, or they're going to say, oh yeah, that's right, that did take place. And you're going, what? It did take place? Here's a book I want you to read, 5 Floors Up.
Yeah, and in New York there was a museum. It's not there was 2 9/11 museums. The National 9/11 Monument Museum, which is in the basement of the new tower, and then there was the Tribute Museum, which was across the street. And the Tribute Museum was run by the families of the survivors and some of the victims, and it had items, of very personal items that were found on the site, and they used to actually give tours of the site to people from that museum. And just 2 weeks ago, closed down, and it closed down because of apathy, lack of funds. The city didn't rescue it. And here it is, you know, and it was like a month, less than a month before the anniversary of 9/11, and it's just unfathomable to me that that even the city would let that happen, but it did. It's closing its doors.
Wow, I've been inside that museum, and just to be in there was, I mean, it was an experience that, I mean, I tried to write immediately afterwards, and it's like, wow, I can't even write about it. I've got to digest what I just felt here.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they say they're gonna save all the material in the museum, and it's gonna go dispersed to other places, but it's just not gonna be the same. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So one thing that you bring up inside this, we've all seen the television shows and the movies and stuff like that, the importance of the Catholic Church with these firefighters, and you bring that up inside your story.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's so much anymore, but in a time period. The first two generations specifically of the book, the Catholic Church played an outsized role in the fire department. I mean, that's not true. I mean, even on 9/11, Father Judge, the chaplain of the beloved chaplain of the department, you know, was a huge figure. But Father Judge didn't have the pull, the juice that the priests did from the first generations. And really, if you knew a priest could get you on a department. He could get you a promotion. I mean, they had a lot of influence because at the time, I mean, in the early 1900s, I think 75% of the fire department was Irish Catholic, and a lot of them were Irish Catholic, and also Irish American Catholics. And you know that's not the case anymore, not by a long shot. But back then it was, and that's where the Catholic Church had its. I mean, I'm a Catholic, and I'm going to get myself in big trouble if I start saying this. I have a friend, Malachi McCourt, and he says the Catholic Church has all the compassion. Exactly like the mafia, only without the compassion. That's what he says. I don't want to say that. Well, that's his quote, not mine.
I've always seen firefighters as being community driven in the way that we've dropped the four walls of the church and they're on the streets of the everyday world. And it's almost like instead of running away from the chariots, firefighters run to the chariots. And that's what I see them as. They don't have that fear of trying to get away. They're going to the fire.
I don't know. I wholeheartedly agree with you, but I don't truly understand it. I mean, I try to describe it in the book, and with varying success. I think just by examples, maybe the reader will understand it better than I. But it's baffling at times. You know, one of the gentlemen I talked to, firefighter I talked to, was Chief Joe Pfeiffer, and Joe Pfeiffer was the first chief in the World Trade Center the day of the attack. He was the initial incident commander, and one of his jobs was to send the fire crews up the stairs. And one of the crews he sent up was headed by his brother, Kevin Pfeiffer, and he never saw Kevin again. You know, they said, you know, okay, he gave him the order to go up the stairs. There was a little interaction. You know, their eyes met. And Kevin nodded, and he followed the order and went up the stairs. And, you know, Joe Pfeiffer has to, I mean, there's no guilt because that's their jobs, but he still has to carry that the rest of his life.
You know, one of the things that my wife, in reading the book and stuff like that she talked about is that she goes, what's going to be interesting about this book is that, sure, it's about New York City, but it's also about anywhere USA, that there's a lot of volunteer firemen out there that put their lives on the line as well. And as a volunteer, they're going, hey, look, I can relate with this book. I'm feeling and I'm experiencing almost the same thing.
I'm glad you said that because that was my hope because I thought it was universal. I don't think these feelings are just New York City feelings at all. I think they're shared by, like you said, fire departments across the country and firefighter families across the country. I think every one of them go through the same things, the same feelings, the same emotion, and a lot of the same danger.
One of my favorite things to do with a firefighter is to walk with them through a grocery store because they are so funny because they all have their own nights where they're going to cook and what they're going to buy and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's famous for that, but there's varying degrees of expertise in firehouses. You'll talk to them, they'll say they're great. All of them are great, great cooks, but I find that hard to believe. But yeah, I mean, today there's cooking shows and cookbooks and recipes and everything, firehouse chili and you name it. And it's still part of the culture, because that's what they do. They go out the whole crew goes out shopping and they all have the input into what they're buying, and they come back and they all, they take turns cooking it, or they put the best cook forward to cook it. And then they sit around the table and eat it.
That's it.
And it's during that ritual where all of the culture and history and information, expertise is passed along to the younger generation. It's like an Indian. It's like a campfire.
Yeah. What did you personally learn from this whole entire project, from when it started inside your imagination to where we presently sit right now?
Yeah, I mean, I learned a lot. I learned how selfless firefighters for the most part are. I learned that they're ordinary heroes, that they have lives and loves and tragedies and triumphs just like everybody else, and that they're regular people. The only difference is that, like you said before, they run into burning buildings with little regard for their own safety. So, remarkable people. Just remarkable people.
I'll tell you, somebody that I really want to make sure that gets this book is Michael Lombardi, an actor who was part of Rescue Me. And I had to chuckle when I read that they're comparing your story to Rescue Me and Blue Bloods, because Michael, in a conversation, really spoke very highly about the stories of Rescue Me. And he's, and we talked about firefighters and stuff like that. And it's like, what a connection that what you're doing here on these pages can also inspire actors to do better at what they're doing when they're sharing the story of the firefighters.
Oh boy, that makes me feel great. God bless you. Yes, please share it with people who can benefit from it, or even take it and make something out of it. That'd be even better. But that's wonderful. Thank you for that.
I know as writers, we can never put down the writing instrument. So what's your next project, or can you even talk about that yet?
Well, no. I mean, I'm not with the CIA. Although I wrote a bunch of Ghost wrote a bunch of books that I signed NDAs, so I can't. There is a Secret Service component to what I do, but I don't know. I'm looking for a time. I'm kind of like at a point where there were a couple of false starts, but I'm always looking, and I know something else is going to happen, because we never put down the pen.
Nope.
Keep doing it.
Yeah, it just, when it hits you, you just jot down an idea. It's like creating a guitar riff that becomes a song that we hear 10, 15 years later that everybody calls a favorite.
That's true. That is really, really true.
Well, Brian, you got to come back to the show anytime in the future. The door is always going to be open for you.
Oh, Ariel, I would come back in a heartbeat. I had such fun. You're a great guy, good interviewer too.
Excellent.
So
thank you so much. Will you be brilliant today, okay, sir?
Okay, you too.